Good evening and welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly hangout where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. The standard disclaimer applies. The thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. To interact with us, send questions and comments to our Twitter page at Mason Roundtable or on the Facebook event page. My name is John Ruark, past master of the Patriot Lodge number 1957, and now installed excellent king of Loudon Chapter 55. And I'll hand it off to Robert Johnson.
Oh, hey, it was just writing some dues checks. Anyway, Robert Johnson here, Waukegan Lodge number 78. Waukegan, Illinois, and current master there. Back to you, John.
Thank you. And the other Johnson brother, Nick.
Who, me? Nick Johnson, past master, Corinthian Lodge number 67, and a bunch of other stuff.
Alrighty. Juan Sepulveda.
Hello everybody, Juan Sepulveda here from Orange Blossom Lodge number 80 in Kissimmee, Florida, and the host of the Winding Stairs Freemasonry podcast.
And last but not least, we've got the whole set tonight, Jason Richards.
Hi everybody, my name is Jason Richards. I am the Junior Warden of Acacia Lodge number 16 in good old Clifton, Virginia, and this is Frank.
Frank with his glowing eyes. So for those on the podcast, Jason's got a skull. And I approve. All right, Masonic news has been light after the big bomb that was dropped last week, so let's just move right into MMQOT, which is the Masonic Monday question on Tuesday.
Oh boy, well this is exciting. I'm back to the old style. All right, so I'm glad all you seekers out there did a great job. We had a number of correct answers on this. It's only tangential.
Would you say you had a plethora of answers?
A plethora. A plethora. See.
Of
All right.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
I shouldn't know that movie, but I do. All right. So the last week's question was about playing cards. So here we go. Before you, in the face cards, is the father of one of our first Grandmasters, ritualistically speaking. Find him. Who is this famous father? Which suit and which card value was he?
It was a Joker, right?
Is this your card?
Not
It's
the
the Joker.
jesters.
It's the Joker.
Yeah, Jesters. Hello. Or is it this card? No.
No.
Okay.
Try
hold
again.
on. Try again. All right, here we go. All right, hold
You
on.
can actually see the cards. There's too much glare coming off your computer.
King of Spades.
King of Spades. This would be, under the French card system, the King David, father of King Solomon, or Shlomo. He is obviously the King of Spades. So, congratulations to Greg Guffey, Christopher Croto, Justin Miller, Jonathan Primo, Simon Dick, Michael Laidlaw, Jared Chapman, Blake Leach, James Webb, Joey Boyer, Darius Butler, Edward Dixon, Christopher Fetko, and Chris Eckert II. You guys all got it right. So here is my reward to you. Good job, guys. All right. I know. I've been asking for prizes and prize money, but, auditors, attorneys, that kind of thing.
Don't use it all at once.
The Masonic Roundtable is a labor of love.
True. Very true.
The only one who's got a Ferrari is John.
Yes.
It's a beautiful car, too. I love it.
Yeah.
It lets me touch it.
It's a Power Wheels.
I was going to say it's like a matchbox.
Oh, jeez.
It's beautiful.
How about this week?
So all right. The
Besides,
Masonic
we all
Monday.
know John would get a DeLorean.
Yes.
That is actually true. Would it be able to travel to 88 miles per hour?
Of course it would.
Marty! All
Do you have
right.
another question for us, Nick?
I think I might. I promise I'll stop screwing around. Maybe. Masonic Monday question for the week of September 21st, 2015. This week's question is, for much of Freemasonry's early period, the mystic ties were bound through traveling military warrants. These lodges would be attached to a military unit and would travel wherever the unit was stationed. The Grand Lodge of Ireland was one of the most prolific at warranting these lodges during that period, while a number of Prince Hall Grand Lodges continue to warrant military lodges to this day. Although that period has ended for the most part in Ireland, 2 Irish lodges that hold a traveling military warrant currently meet in the country of England, and they continue to meet with regularity. Name these 2 lodges. When you have an answer, send it to masonicmonday@gmail.com. Don't forget to include your lodge name and your lodge number and the hashtag invasion. That's right, invasion. Back to you, John.
Wow. Alrighty. Switching on over to this week's topic. We're getting right into it pretty early tonight. This is about the Lodge historian. In particular, Lodge history, right? We're all very proud of our lodges, and most of us have lodges that are older than we are, with the Patriot Lodge being a huge exception. But who keeps track of those things? One thing that we want to talk about tonight is how is that history preserved, who does it, and how it's done. So let's get right into that. From a specifically officer title, do any of your jurisdictions have the historian themselves as like even a elected or nominated position? Yeah. So Virginia, silence is concurrence.
Yeah.
In Florida, the Grand Lodge does have a Grand Lodge historian, and they compile the most significant Masonic events every year, and they document those and keep them in record. Overall, for the whole state of Florida.
Right.
So. And in Minnesota, we actually have under our Masonic charities, we have a Minnesota Masonic Historical Society and Museum, and we're currently building a building, and I'll get into that later on, that will contain a fairly sizable museum. And so we actually have, I was a member for a long time, the Historical Society, and I let my membership lapse, but I can discuss that as well. So, but yeah, here in Minnesota, we actually it's separated off from the Grand Lodge, and it's found actually in the Masonic Charities side of everything.
Very cool. So you actually have a whole society that's done to preserve lodge history. Very cool. Well, here in Virginia, we don't have any specific lodge historian, but I do know that people that take on that role, right? So it's kind of a labor of love as well. And so the first question I have is for all of you: does your lodge have someone who is kind of the de facto historian if it's not a title? And I'll start with Jason. Is anyone keeping track of Acacia's history as the go-to guy? Make sure you're unmuted. There you go.
I am unmuted now. Well, outside of the lodge secretary who records all the minutes, and to some degree the Clifton Historical Society, we don't have anybody who's actively keeping track of the lodge history. But Acacia's interesting because it's a part of the Clifton National Historic District, and it's in and of itself a National Historic place, or a historic building on the Historic Building Registry. So I've thought off and on about actually compiling a history and doing a history of Acacia, but here I am on Tuesday nights hanging out with you guys instead.
We have our own recorded history at this point.
So I think one of the things that about Acacia's history that gets all the press is Oscar Scott Woody who was a famous member, famous because he passed away actually on the Titanic, and they found his dues card a week later. And there's a whole story with that that we can go into at a later time. But that's
Sounds
really the biggest piece of lodge history that we have and actively remember.
very cool. Juan, how about you? Down in Florida, I know you've now switched lodges recently, and
Yes.
you can count for either one. Uh,
Well, I can tell you that for Orange Blossom, I really don't know actually what is done. I do know that Brother Rick Overby, he is a legend when it comes to working with our website and compiling information, putting it together. So our page has a publicly accessible a page itself that gives you good documentation from when the lodge started in 1885 and how it moved from different locations until where it is right now. With Iola, I know that we had pretty much all our minutes in our lodge. I don't know exactly where it's written, but I know that there's a procedure for compiling the minutes at the end of a certain amount of time. They're put into a book, and those are supposed to be stored in a secure location so that they're not deteriorating. But I can't tell you all the details because I haven't found it. What I do know is that I was geeking out 1 week at Iola. In our storage area, we had files and files of all the old minutes, and we had minutes that were 100 years old, well, almost 100 years old. And I'm going through them, looking at donations of furniture, arguments that the brothers were having, and went into the minutes trying to get stuff. And 2 weeks later, it wasn't there anymore. I'm like, wow, there goes my research.
wow.
Yeah. So I think they stored those because they weren't in a the location is like a garage. So here in Florida with the heat and the humidity, those were just going to disintegrate in a matter of years.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that they took them out of there to preserve them.
Good. How about in Minnesota?
In terms of my own personal lodge,
Yeah.
or
What is your lodge doing to preserve its history?
well, interestingly enough, we're coming up to the sesquicentennial in 2 years, and so we're currently in the process of compiling the reams and reams of data that we have compiled over the years. And I mean reams as in we actually literally have the old dot matrix stuff. And the thing is, it's kind of interesting with my lodge. There was a fire, and this was really common in pioneer lodges of the day. You'd have fires, and our lodge building was next to the railroad tracks, as most lodges at that time would have been. And so, our building back in the 1880s was torched. What happened was a hot box or something like that lit everything on fire, and we had the Great Fire of Farmington of 1880 something or whatever it was. And so we lost everything but the charter from that time. So, it's only bits and pieces and fragments that we can find concerning that particular era of Corinthian. But luckily, once the building was finished in 1914, most of those records we now have, and we don't have any problems. So we have, and so what we're doing right now is we actually have a committee set up to put this all together. And, you can imagine a lodge that was founded just after the Civil War is going to have quite a bit of data that we're going to have to sift through, and especially when you're having to put together fragments, it gets even more complex. So, but luckily we have a committee, so and one that's actually active and not just in name only. So
Very cool. Very, very cool. Robert, how about over in Waukegan?
Oh man, so I guess when I started at the lodge, there had been attempts in the past at putting together a history of Waukegan Lodge. It's got a rich history. We have a charter date of I think it's October 4th, 1848. and then we got our first charter, like our official charter, on October 4th, 1849, and had our first annual meeting on Halloween night, 1849. And so we've had attempts at compiling all of the data over the years. There were some great attempts, mostly hand-typed documents. You could feel the emboss from the hand type. I mean, these are retyped articles that people found in the papers and decided to type them up in case you could never find it again. Lake County Chronicle, for instance, was a paper that we just don't have access to anymore. So a lot of these articles about the lodge, because we actually had 3 different lodges. Here's a picture of that's our lodge that still sits across the street, and we don't have it anymore, but it's still there. Historical landmark.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's not awesome that you guys sold it, but
yeah, we sold it for like $35,000 too. So this is the official landmark. It says that it's historical landmark signed by the mayor, who is the brother of our lodge. But there's been just attempts over the years to put together these brief histories, and I was lucky enough to come across them when I decided to clean out the storage room, which I later found out was actually the library. So when I cleaned it all out, I found all of the paperwork, and then I found this dusty old plaque, and I dusted it off. It was a picture of this guy, and it was the Jack Stewart Memorial Library. And Jack Stewart was a member of our sister lodge who put together probably the most concise chronology of our lodge. And when he passed away, he left the lodge some money and a history, and nobody ever did anything with it. So this episode actually came along in a really good time because I just recently started going through these, and I've started to take. It's kind of like I feel like an early or late 1800s pastor of some faith, because I'm having to go through and do some horizontal reading, going from gospel to gospel and trying to mix them. So that they're in proper chronology. And so I guess at the proper time, I mean, I guess I'm compiling it. I wouldn't call me the historian, but I'm trying to put together something for posterity and to put it on the interweb. It's kind of an interactive, almost scrapbook of sorts. Is what my goal is. So when you guys had the idea for this episode, I thought it was really great because I can really get some good pointers from you guys.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Let's see. As for the Patriot Lodge, as I alluded to earlier, we've only been around since 2011. That being said, now's the best time to start capturing that history while most of the members are still around to remember the chartering of that lodge. Another thing too is that my mother lodge, Herndon Lodge, number 264. They did a really good job of preserving their lodge history, and I wanted to screen share their website, herndonlodge264.org, and they have a history tab, and they have the overall history of Herndon Lodge with a couple pictures of some past masters. But I think they did a really good job of breaking down almost by decade.
Yeah, that's great.
Like what the dues were, who owned the building, some of the highlights. So they really kind of, without going into great detail, you can kind of skip ahead and see when they bumped up dues and who got mad at who over that. Some of the pictures are broken right now. I need to go talk to the webmaster. But I do remember, as part of that, which is kind of leading into the next question, is one thing that we did. I was fortunate enough to say I had a hand in contributing to this. These pictures of the past masters, obviously, they didn't start digitally. So what we did was we took that typical row of past master pictures, and we took them off the walls. We cracked open the glass casing, the picture frame, and a brother brought a scanner, another brother bought a laptop, and we just had a whole assembly line and started scanning in the 100, 150 different past masters that our lodges had.
Wow.
And it just took an afternoon. We were all there, had a good time, had lunch, and just really knocked it out. In fact, we even scanned in our original charter.
Nice.
Yeah. So that was kind of cool because it was in a nice frame, and we were very delicate in taking it out. But again, we wanted to have a digital copy for, even for no other reason as a worst case backup, right? But now that's getting into the point of an online digital history, that was really going to be the next question I had for you guys, which was, as Robert's trying to do, especially it's more relevant to him now, what are some ideas for some specific new ideas other than the typical typed up paper, the reprinting of the minutes? I mean, we keep minutes for a reason. What are some other ideas that you have that may help bring this into the 21st century? And I'll start with Juan.
Well, my mind is just it's tingling with with ideas, because I just think I really like history. I really enjoy being in tune with all these connections, and I can tell you with more details about Eola. I remember when there was a moment that I was trying to research a little bit more about the very beginning of Eola, because Eola had a very nice building in downtown Orlando, and it was constructed specifically for the lodge, but they had to move out of there. It's called the Eola Lodge because it was in front of the Eola Lake. But the cool thing is, like, some of the names of the people that were pioneers, as if you want to call them that, in our lodge, were the names that you would see in the streets. So street names all throughout the city, things that are synonymous with Orlando, Bumby, and I can't remember all the other ones. These were brothers of ours, and finding the history of how these men became so influential in the community that now the streets have their names. I think that's something that's good, especially for the brothers that are joining now. If they come in and the website that they find from their lodge is a black screen with just a little bit of just a little bit of white text and illegible paragraphs, then they're not gonna be so interested in the history. But what you've done with your lodge is something that it would be interesting to me, and I invite the brothers. Maybe we can put links on our show notes for the brothers that are interested in seeing the pages that our particular lodges have of our lodge's history. Take a look at them and maybe get some ideas from there, and compare it to what you've done. And if you have a Usenet website, then emulate the others.
That's great.
Well, John, you mentioned something interesting talking about the minutes. There's a reason we take minutes, and of course the minutes are probably the most reliable, persistent documentation of what actually happens in a lodge. But you need to remember that probably some of the best sources of information for history are actually outside of the lodge. And whether it's public records data, or just building data, it's very interesting, given how many of these old grandiose buildings have now been sold and have changed hands. They were Masonic lodges 20, 30 years ago, and now there's something completely different. And there's a whole backstory there as well. And building a lodge history is increasingly like being a detective and just trying to run down all these leads to see if you can find any information that actually pertains to your specific lodge. So it's really cool. But check the public records around your area, and also check local historical societies, because Clifton's a National Historic Landmark, And so there's the entire town of Clifton, has a history revolving partially around the lodge.
Very cool. Now, Nick, I know that we had talked earlier about this this idea before we got started, and you had a couple other interesting ideas.
Sure. I'm not sure which one yet, but
A couple.
first, at least with my lodge in particular, because we're coming up to that sesquicentennial, somebody made the suggestion of doing like a Ken Burns style documentary, and just like what Jason is saying, most of your really good, really accurate, really actually
Wait.
sources. Yes.
Ken
Yes.
Burns, the documentarian?
Wow, that
Never
goes
mind.
back. That's
That
a
goes
reference.
way back.
Wow, holy smokes! Hold on, let me check my watch. That's crazy.
We've got to
We
go
love you
back.
guys. We love you guys.
Back to the future.
Nice.
Continue. Ken Burns,
Oh, okay.
documentarian.
Oh, yeah. Well, and Jason is absolutely correct, and so now I get to be on his good side twice. But most of your excellent sources are actually outside of anything your lodge has written. Understanding my lodge, you have to actually look outside of what was going on within the building. I mean, these guys were coming back from the Civil War. Later on, there was a large influx of Irishmen that came in that settled in the same town. There's a lot of animosity between a lot of people. All of a sudden, I mean, it's a fascinating thing. There was a fire that destroyed pretty much everything, including, the Oddfellows were going to be the organization that survived, not the Masons. So it's kind of interesting that you have to look outside of just we paid for Auntie May's horse because it fell and that's what happened. And that's not going to help you. And so for us, it's been really interesting just to have to look through all these old newspapers and check out the Dakota County Historical Society. There's a wealth of knowledge out there.
So I've got a crazy idea. Now,
Yes.
if your lodge is fortunate enough to have a lot of that historical record, historical buildings, that kind of stuff, that's all well and good. But I think one untapped asset are really those really, really old, really, really grumpy past masters, right? The ones that have been there, that owe Moses a quarter. These guys, while they can be a handful sometimes, they know the lodge inside and out. They know where every nail is. They know who did what to whom. They know how agreements were made, and a lot of them are getting up there in age. So one thing that I recommend is, everyone has a smartphone now with a microphone. It costs you nothing to take your smartphone, hit record, and just before dinner, let an old guy just tell you about the history of the lodge.
Not in a tiled lodge.
Yes, not in a tiled lodge. Yes, do not bring your smartphone with its record functions into tiled lodge. But like I said, before dinner, right? These guys have a wealth of knowledge, and you may find insights of things that were never written down, of things that definitely give the lodge the character that it has. So, what you do with it after that, I mean, there's a variety of things you could do with that. You could turn it into a podcast. You could turn it into something to share on the website, or if nothing else, just have a couple copies of that digital file, with the archives of the lodge.
Exactly. That's a great point. And it's true. It's not really that hard to do. And really, we're watching these guys go, and there's a huge age disparity between the guys that knew stuff and then all of us new guys. And at some point we're going to lose probably 40 years of history that it'll just disappear.
Right.
We're just going to lose that. It's just scary. It scares me absolutely to death.
You'll live.
Yeah.
I'll live. Well.
No, but it's
Yeah.
true. I wanted to share something with you, brothers, that one of the brothers from my jurisdiction approached me and said, "Hey, brother, I know that you have a podcast and you have the equipment to do it. I think it would be a great idea if you sat down with Right Honorable John B. Fletcher." Now, for the brothers that are listening to me that are within Central Florida, they know that Right Honorable John B. Fletcher is a legend. This man is, if he's not, I think he's in his 90s if I'm not mistaken, but this man is sharp, sharp, sharp. He knows the floor work, he knows the lectures, he knows everything, and he knows the history of our district. And I had the pleasure of sitting with him one evening. We pretty much arranged to sit down with him, and I brought my digital cameras, I brought my microphones, my digital recorder, and everything. We had a conversation for perhaps maybe an hour and a half, and he took it back to when he first joined Masonry, and he was in the Air Force, and he was even talking about how and one day I have the digital recording, so I'll make an episode for the Winding Stairs, because there's a lot that's fascinating. Where one of the things, and I'll move on, is that he talked about that when he was in the Air Force, one of the generals would summon him to his office, and he wasn't very high in rank at the time, but people were intrigued. It's like, why are they calling him? And when he comes out of the office, he is not, he's not, freaking out. And it was that the general was calling him to practice catechism. So he would actually come to the office, practice his catechism, then say goodbye. When usually anybody who was summoned to that office, they were being either kicked out or they were, straightened up. But it was great. It felt good that, sometimes we go to lodge and we have these brothers that are high up in age, and they sit on their own table and they're having their own conversations, and then you have the young ones doing their separate thing. This broke the mold, and we had everybody sitting and listening to this man attentively to every little detail of his Masonic story, and that was fascinating. So brothers, don't miss out on that opportunity before it's too late.
So we talked about audio, we talked about video, and that kind of thing. Another idea I had, and I'm glad I was able to find it, was also got a book. That this was published. This is about General Trexler, who's a very big deal up in Allentown, Pennsylvania, where Brother Paul Chamberlain, who's been on a couple episodes, that's where his lodge meets in the Masonic Temple there.
We both got that when we were up there last.
Yes, but I got the book out for the show faster than you did.
Yeah,
so,
it's downstairs on the library.
But the guy did a good job of compiling the history of the area, of the capitalists in that time frame that helped fund the building. And it's not a very long read. It's only about 140 pages or so. Pretty easy, concise history, and it's there printed up as a nice little handout. And so, in fact, the reason I have one is while I was there, the author was in the building, and he just happened to say, "Hey, do you want to buy a book about our lodge?" And I said, "Sure," and I'm not saying it's a huge fundraising idea, but I'm saying it's good that you can have something tangible that guests can purchase, that can use, can learn about the history of your lodge, and more importantly, it be there on someone's shelf, right? Because even digital files can be lost over time, but nothing like a good old solid book.
Does it come with periodical updates like the yearbooks used to?
That's hilarious. That's a great idea. Let me check. Nope, I hit refresh and it didn't add new content. So.
No. You brought up the idea of a book, and one thing that's really cool that, again, I don't know if a lot of lodges, I'm sure there's tons that do, Waukegan still has its original handwritten bylaws book, and then the signatures have always been in that book. So when a guy is made a Mason, he goes and signs that same book, and it hasn't been reproduced, it hasn't been lost, so it's still in really good shape from like 1848. And like, what is your thought on how appropriate it would be to digitally scan something like that and let people be able to click a button and have a digital page flip to look through its signatures? I mean, do you think that's like it'd be kind of weird, right? Because some guys don't want people knowing they're a Mason, or maybe like.
Yeah.
So if they're still living, our social media policy in Virginia has this whole, you kind of have to let the brother know that you're outing them, basically, for any photos or anything like that. We have some other rules about, you can't use people's names until they're fully a Master Mason. But if it's someone who's deceased, if it's like, scanning in your minutes from, your first year as a lodge, you can safely assume for most of you guys that those members are long gone, and I think it's a great thing to put online to have something to read through. I know of other lodges and Grand Lodges that have undertaken that effort to digitize all of their minutes. I find that fascinating, just to be able to sit anywhere in the world or even on your phone and scan through and read these old documents. That's a great time to be alive.
One of the cool things that we actually went through, one of the I think it was the second compiling of minutes, highlights, I should say, for Waukegan when I was going through this. Fascinating stuff. I mean, you'll never know what you're going to find, right? I mean, just to give you a taste, I mean, if you're going to undergo the effort, the things you're going to find are amazing. Like, I never dreamed in a million years. So Waukegan Lodge used to be Union Lodge, and then they spawned off Waukegan 324, and they went through a merger. Waukegan said, hey, we don't have enough guys to operate as two individual lodges right now. We need to consolidate. And Union said no, and then like 2 years and 7 months later they said yes. And I never knew why they consolidated. I just figured it was like the downturn of Masonry, like, maybe it got sparse in the area. It was because of the Civil War. We didn't have enough guys. People were off doing that.
Wow.
And when I read that, I got chills. And then I got chills again because it said we draped the charter. We draped the charter in honor of our deceased Supreme Magistrate. And then it said President Lincoln. And I thought,
ooh,
wow. Like, just the stuff that you find and just these files, there's just like, it's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And every time you go back to your lodge, there's like, you're living that history. I went to Jason Richards' lodge when they did a second degree in Clifton. You walk in and you feel the history. You go upstairs and it's like, literally, I'm not kissing Jason's butt here, but it is Acacia Lodge. Literally is probably the coolest lodge I've ever visited, just because of how intimate it is and how traditional the lodge room is set up. It's straight out of the past. It's so cool, and you live that history. I would love to read Clifton's history at some point if you guys.
It's the bee's knees.
It is. It's really.
Yeah.
Cool. So if you guys are ever out there, you gotta go to the lodge. Okay, it's awesome.
I can confirm that. That's a good idea.
Yeah, John was there too. Sorry.
Don't forget me. I got pictures.
You do have pictures, but I mean, just to be able to put this kind of stuff together in a lodge history is fascinating, and I think it's important that we all. I would love for every lodge in America to just have something put together, on a website. That would, I mean, it adds a real value to the membership, because if you don't know what the value is, right? Like, you don't know what the value of a quarter is, you never know.
Mm-hmm.
And the second you're in that lodge, you don't know what it's worth. You start reading all that history, and you start thinking, wow, this isn't just any old Masonic lodge. I mean, none of them are just a Masonic lodge, but you get what I'm saying.
Well, it's the closest thing we've got to Masonic treasure hunts these days.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just you never know what you're going to find. You never know where it's buried.
Or is
and
it?
and it's all really cool stuff. So Nick Cage should have been constructing a lodge history.
Nick
instead of
Cage should have
looking for
been
the-
lodge secretary. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes. Yes.
What? Where? Hey, I'm Nick Cage.
I'd rather see him as lodge secretary than as Superman.
Where's the treasure?
Oh, jeez. All right. Jason, why don't we go take a peek over at social media to see what other people are saying about their lodge histories?
Okay, yeah, we've had some good comments. Actually, brother Greg Knott, let me share my screen here. He had actually mentioned that there is a lodge in Illinois, Homer Lodge number 199, that actually put together a museum room. And it was actually Todd Creason who put that together, which is really cool. So they've got a display case and actually, hey, there's Brother Greg right there. He's one of the Midnight Freemasons. He's an awesome guy, and Todd Creason's okay too, but we love Todd. So.
Okay, your audio just cut out.
Yeah,
Jason.
that's something that's. How about this now?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, so yeah, I would recommend you check that page out, Homer Masonic Temple and Museum, and that's just that's something you see a lot actually in lodges these days. There aren't a lot of lodges that have a distinct whole room for a museum. But you do have those lodges that have a display case off to the side. Herndon Lodge, your mother lodge, John, has that. It's just a little place where you can preserve, a couple little tidbits of Masonic history. And actually, one of the things that Acacia is trying to do is trying to set aside room for a museum, not necessarily about the lodge, but for the town of Clifton. So that's one of the things that we're working on over the next couple of years.
Almost every lodge that I have visited has a little case in the corner or a tall furniture with a display of old books and old documents. And if a brother sees one like that in their home lodge, ask another brother, like, what is this about? Do you know anything about it? Especially like pull aside one of the older brothers and ask them if they can tell you a little bit more about those documents. I think that makes for really fascinating discussions.
And it's a good place to start with lodge history too, because you get your hands on some really cool artifacts, and it's awesome.
Hey, real quick.
Go ahead.
Let me just show you this really quick. There's your Nick Cage, right? Wasn't he at Nick's lodge?
Oh man.
Ay, ay, ay.
And The Rock.
Dude. He has my purple coat that
Uh-oh.
Jack Wagon.
But I like how that picture, that's my favorite picture of Nick Cage, because he's wearing a shirt with a picture of Nick Cage on it.
Yeah, brothers, I wanted to share some photos. Tell me if you can see those.
Not yet.
And how about now?
Nope.
Come on, Microsoft, help me out here.
Could have gotten a Mac.
It's a black screen right now, Juan.
Because of the application I'm using. Never mind. Moving on.
Okay. So let's go to Brother Brad Parsons, who said, he doesn't himself do much to preserve the history at the lodge. He takes a lot of pictures, but that's about it. But an idea that he wants to start at his lodge is have every living past master and outgoing worshipful master write up a 1 or 2 page paper about their year as worshipful master.
But that's only one sentence, right? I mean, that would just be, wasn't like that during my year.
Yes,
It was
I can
perfect.
I can do that in one word. Awesome.
My
He
one
just
word.
thought, how cool would it be to read a worshipful master's thoughts from 100 years ago, or even 60 years ago.
That's a great idea.
And it's cool, but remember, history is written by those who win. So there's always going to be that inherent bias of, well, in my year we did everything and it was amazing. It was the best year for masonry ever, and the guy who came after me just is going to totally screw it up.
That's why you have the minutes. You can go there and see exactly what happened.
It can be like a trial proceeding. In your deposition, I mean the minutes. It said.
You
Yeah,
can
that's
see
why-
the things that happened during those years, and you can have a better idea that we happen to repeat some of the things, some of the problems that we had before. I've heard Robert
Nothing
many
is ever
times.
new.
Yeah, I've heard Robert many times read short talk bulletins that present the dwindling of membership or the retention, or we're not focusing on education or this, and when you look at the date, we're talking about 1920s, and
We have never solved any of the problems.
that's the secret. Don't tell her.
You only got a few months left to fix it.
Well, I'm going to share my screen again because Joe Vanderstelt, a longtime listener of our show, actually shared the page for the Michigan Masonic Museum and Library. And this Facebook page is actually really neat because what they do is they actually go through most of, or a lot of the artifacts that they have, and they talk a little bit about them as they can,
Yeah, I got one of those.
which is really, really neat.
Cool.
Yeah.
Those
So go, and if you live in Michigan and you visit the Michigan Masonic Museum and Library, you can pick up one of our TMR bookmarks there. So icing on the cake. Oh yes, and this is something that every Master Mason needs to know about.
Awesome.
They have their Masonic lapel pin collection on display. And I'm really, I sent them a couple TMR pins as well, so I'm really hoping they make it into their collection at some point.
Wow.
Dude, I think all of us have more pins than those guys. What's up with
I
that?
know I do for sure.
They only took a picture of one of the cases. I'm sure they have like 50 of them in the back. So going
Well,
over to Twitter, we've got John Green, who says, actually, in our minutes from the 20s to 40s and 50s, we had a line item in the minutes to purchase cigars, like a standing line item.
Bring back history.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Well, it's kind of interesting, discussing these weird little things that every lodge kind of has. Something that a lot of people don't know is that my lodge, Corinthian Lodge, actually owns a cemetery. So, it's kind of interesting that we actually have this, it's not living history, what's the opposite? Dead history that is out there, and I'm actually on the board for it. And it's kind of interesting in that, I have this access to all these different records and understanding all the families that lived in Farmington. And, the thing is, what people forget is just how connected the Masonic Lodge was. If you've ever read the book, it was Sinclair Lewis's, dang it, which one was it? The first one, the main one. Shoot.
Haven't heard of it.
Anyway, a great book. I'm going to just talk about it without actually saying the title because, that's my brain. But, it's kind of interesting is that, Sinclair Lewis actually didn't like the Masons. It's kind of obvious that he didn't. And, one of the pictures that he has is that when they're arriving in this small little Minnesota town, well, it's Minnesota town, one of the guys has a Masonic watch. It's hard to think about that. So many men were Masons at that time. So when you're looking at like the cemetery that's in my town, you can actually see the connections, the family connections between the lodge and then the outside community. And so find any source that you have access to, especially cemeteries are a great source of information, especially the people who are the people who maintain the records and do that stuff. And the actual book was Main Street. I cannot believe I forgot that, since I think every high school student here has to know that book, frontwards and backwards. But yeah, so look at every source, including cemeteries. They are a wealth of knowledge.
High schoolers can't be Masons and probably aren't listening to this podcast.
No, they're probably not. They probably don't care.
They're probably in DMLA
Yeah, probably.
Sure.
Yeah. Wow.
or Scouts.
Episode 42. But hashtag episode 42. And it's kind of interesting. Speaking of that museum that you pointed to, I'll screen share the building that's going up in Minnesota. This is actually what's going up here, and it's going to be completed I think next year. And it's our Heritage Center, and it's going to have this fairly massive museum of all the different historical items that we have in Minnesota. Minnesota's had a long history of masonry. It's existed since before the state was even founded, and I think that's pretty much standard for every state. The Grand Lodge came first, and so I don't know. Encourage you to check out the Minnesota Museum that's going to be going up when it finally gets completed. So
Very cool. Well, it's about that time. Let's start wrapping up, and we'll start with Juan.
Well, I'm very excited about reading through some of these documents I printed. I found the Orange Blossom Lodge history. I want to go through it. And yesterday I went to Lodge, #go to Lodge, and I got a chance to spend a very brief amount of time in their library. Shout out to Brother Jason Cintrón, who's always making the brothers there feel welcome, and all the brothers from Orange Blossom. But I think that if the new brothers, as they join, they get a chance to look into the history of their lodge, they can connect a little bit better. They can see the brothers that were leaders in their community and understand the influence that they had in their communities, and perhaps extrapolate what kind of qualities actually made them such influential individuals. So it's something to aspire to. And if you don't, what is that saying? Say if you don't know your history, you're bound to repeat it.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. And it is true. It's the good and it's the bad. We might be complaining about things now that were happening 100 years ago, but if we don't spend time looking back and figuring out our history, then we don't know that we really need new ideas and lasting solutions in order to actually move out of the problems we're facing. So, brothers, thank you again for listening. Make sure to, if you've listened to this for a while and you haven't told anybody about it, make sure to point them to the MasonicRoundtable.com. Have them go and check out. We have over 83 episodes, 84 episodes?
This is 84.
This is 84. So you have 83 different episodes from all kinds of topics related to Masonry. If you're new
Actually,
to
we've got 85.
84 and a half?
We have a half
We've
one.
got 80. We've got 2 half ones.
Ah, that's right. Yeah, so brothers, check it out and make sure that you engage with us. Just like don't just listen, engage in the conversation. One way to do that is to go to our page or go on YouTube and leave comments. If you like Masonic Podcast and you want to find more information that will get you moving forward up the winding stairs, go to thewindingstairs.com. I have a couple of episodes coming up in the next weeks, and you don't want to miss them. Thewindingstairs.com. Thank you, brothers, for listening.
All right, thank you very much, Jason Richards. Over to you.
Sorry, I was responding to a tweet on Twitter from someone who was engaging with us. See, this is what happens. If you watch us live, you engage with us. We read your stuff on the episode, and you get tweets back from either me or John. So it's an awesome thing to do live. But Lodge history, when we talk about research and Masonic research, we've talked about the two camps, right? We've got the philosophical and the empirical historical. And you can really nerd out with the esoterics and with the philosophy, but you can really, really get going and do just as much nerding out on the history. And there needs to be someone to document that history, and maybe that's not you, but there are ways that you can help capture it and preserve it, whether it's digitizing old records, taking pictures, helping to keep the Lodge website up to date, or doing the grunt work of going through the minutes and historical documents to make sure that that rich history that you have as a lodge and an organization within your community isn't lost. And I think it's really the responsibility of every Mason to help preserve the Masonic legacy, because we've been around since time immemorial, partially due to piss poor record keeping. So, don't let that happen again. But there's so many cool things you can do, and it really is, Masonic history is just a treasure trove of interesting facts and things that you never would have thought actually existed or were possible. So with that, I will sign off, but I'll say thank you so much to everybody who is watching the show week after week. Keep your topics coming. We have a fantastic episode for you next week. I think it's going to be really amazing. Actually, the next couple weeks. We're going to get back into the esoteric side of things, and we're going to nerd out like nobody's business. It's going to be a lot of fun. You'll want to be there for us. So send us messages on Facebook, send us emails, let us know what you want us to talk about, let us know any feedback you have for the show. We've been doing this over a year and a half now. We're not quitting anytime soon. We haven't kicked Nick off the show yet. So he's pretty much here for as long as we're here. At this point in time. So besides, I'm too lazy to do MMQOT by myself. So, yeah.
It's very true, actually.
Yeah. So thanks, guys, so much. It's so great hearing from all of you on almost a daily basis at this point. So thanks. Keep it up, and let us know what you like and don't like. Subscribe on YouTube, and I will move it over to John.
All right, and Nick Johnson.
All right, I'm going to spoil the next two weeks for everyone.
No.
Next week we'll be having Nick Cage, who will be discussing National Treasure 3. We have so many spoilers for you that TMZ is going to start crying for all these exclusives that we got that they don't got. So
Half-Life 3 confirmed.
Half-Life, truth.
Fallout 5.
Illuminati confirmed. It's it's kind of interesting, being trapped in the committee work, because I started looking at the 150th that we have coming up, and during my year, because it was 7 years ago, and I was trying to figure out what to do, and it's been on our plate now for as long as I've been a Mason, and it's kind of interesting how worried we get over our own history, because we don't want to screw it up. We have a love for the deep historical roots that we have in this order that we participate in every single day. I mean, you go into Lodge and you can feel it. I mean, it's not just the musty walls and things like that. It's the fact that you're engaging in the same practices that other men have done for a long, long time. And, you don't want to screw it up. And so, I understand that, and that's why it's been just fascinating and a blast, really, to start to dig into all these records. And, we at an area conference that we had here a long time ago, we had a really interesting archivist show up, and she explained different methods in which to protect books and how to preserve records and things like that. And, a few of the lodges were, what do we do? It sounds like a lot of money and things like that. And I was sitting there going, guys, we have to do this. This just has to happen, or it will be forgotten. And it will be forgotten forever. And, through efforts like digitizing, things like that, it's a good thing. The Scottish Rite here is digitizing its library in a huge way. And it's a huge initiative that they're doing to try and get every single volume that they have digitized. And they have old books from the 1700s, from the Grand Orient of France, when it was, early 1700s, things like that. And we have to get these things done, and we have to get them preserved, or we won't have any records left, and we'll just have, I don't know, 1950s stale coffee and stale donuts and sad, sad buildings.
You have donuts
so yeah,
at your lodge.
Yeah.
Nice. I want to go to that lodge.
Yeah,
Ooh,
me too.
yeah, or my awesome super kick-ass lodge, which is called Agape Lodge, UD not yet. And so yeah, it's kind of interesting too. Coming up with that is that you've got the historical, but then you have something like John's, where and Jason's Patriot Lodge, which was started earlier, and it's just kind of interesting to see how that all works. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this. I just, history, it's kind of the thing that brought me into this whole thing, family history and things like that. And, I feel it in my roots, in my bones, this idea of just connecting to this ancient craft. So yeah, we just have to take as much as we can to preserve it. And with that, I have a blog, millennialfreemason.com. You can check out some really interesting articles that we've been posting about Project Agape, which is the new lodge that we're coming up with. Next month, we'll be having a short informational thing with some folks. We're also going to have an article in the E-Mason out here in Minnesota to discuss it. Hopefully, we get 25 signatories, and we can get this done. We can get our little magic charter, and we can have some fun as Masons.
We'll all sign.
And I also have a secret project I'm working on, another one that is not related to that, but more of me going on the road, and it is history related. So I'll let you guys know the details of that once I actually get off my buns and actually do it. So.
Nice. All right,
John?
Robert. I saved Robert for the last because he is going to be putting some history together. So, Robert, what have you taken out of this?
Well, one of the first things that Jason and then Nick seconded was finding your history outside of the lodge. A quick anecdote is that we are now, Waukegan Lodge is really in its fifth meeting place. Originally, we met in an Oddfellows Hall, and then we moved to another it was called the Sons of Temperance, unknown location. And then once we finished that, we actually moved into our first Masonic hall that we built in like 1860. A tremendous building. And then we moved out of there. We built this building in 1921, the one I showed you the picture of earlier. And then when we couldn't afford that, we moved into a retail store. It was a furniture store, and we rehabbed the whole inside, and it's on the main street. But I wanted to go find the original building. Where was it? I wanted to see the original cornerstone. And I went looking everywhere for it. I walked the streets because everything was literally in the same 1 block radius. We never moved out of there. And so I went looking around. I couldn't find anything. So where did I go? I went to the Waukegan Historical Society. And all I did is I walked in there, and I said, what do you have on the Masonic Lodge in Waukegan? And here comes a stack of papers and books. They made me photocopies, and I had never seen the inside of any of these lodges or anything. And here come photos of them and articles about when the lodges were formed or when they dedicated the building. And we didn't have anything like that. I mean, we might have something like that somewhere in the archives in the basement in one of those, old military cabinets that's a fireproof cabinet full of asbestos that you shouldn't be digging through anyway. I mean, there's something to be said there for the value of literally going outside the lodge and looking for that history. Definitely recommend your historical society because the people who run those things volunteer, and if you volunteer for something, it's usually because you love it, unless you're forced by the law. But all this information that I've got here, and with what you guys have talked about tonight, is giving me a really clear idea, I think, of where I'm going to go with Waukegan 78's history. So, once I finish it, I'm going to put it up and I'm going to share it with everybody. and feel free to read through it. I mean, it's nothing, any more special than anything that anybody else has with their lodge histories, but maybe that will indeed inspire you, because I'm going from the idea and I'm going to do it right now. When I get off this show, I have to go type up an amalgamation of this. So I urge you guys to all go do the same. Go out there and pick up those lodge histories, and if you don't have one, put one together. It doesn't cost anything for a free blog page. So with that, I just wanted to say that it's been amazing up to this point this year. My wife's probably going to have a baby on Monday, which means I won't be here on Tuesday. So I hope you guys all have a wonderful show next week. I will most likely be with you again the week after next. So
take your time, bro.
Yeah, I'll take my time. WCY.
But not too much time.
Yeah, not too much. You've all seen my 24-hour calendar.
Balance.
So WCY will have episodes this week and next week, most likely. Baby will be keeping me up late anyway. So, again, hope you guys all have a great week. And if you like Masonic podcasts, like I said, Whence Came You is mine, and it comes out 9:30 on Sunday nights. And that's all. Okay?
Awesome. Well, good luck, Robert, and best wishes to the family.
Thank you.
All right, so in conclusion, history does not need to be confined to your secretary's archives. There are things about your lodge that are worth sharing, for at least to the rest of the brethren, if not to the public. So be proud of your lodge and dig through those. It's kind of related to me back to an old Chinese proverb that said the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is now. And so while history is going to elude us, right, we're going to have past masters and the like that are going to die off and take that knowledge with them. Do it now if you can do it. So get out there and just ask. Just be curious, and then maybe it might turn into a fun project. Another thing that we alluded to but really didn't get into is should we put a lot of the stuff out on websites? And while I'm all for that, the only caveat to that is making sure that it stays updated and relevant, and that someone is there to archive it in case your old 1990s GeoCities website actually does get taken down. Because in the grand scheme of the internet, web pages are dynamic, even though the ones that are stable, because they can go away. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Be active and keep searching for more light. Have a good night.